Hey everyone, so today I have the lovely honor of having my friend Naomi, who is going to give their thoughts and feelings about Trans Day of Visibility. Naomi, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, any salient identities, or anything that you feel would be important for the audience to know to get a sense of who you are?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Chloe. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Happy
This
to
is
have you.
fun. As Chloe already said, my name is Naomi Ardjomand-Kermani, and I am a French, Persian, Kurdish, Neutrois, queer, super femme individual. I use they, them pronouns, but I really just prefer my own name as my own pronoun because I'm very vain and very full of myself, and I love hearing my name. Um,
So, this is for Trans Day of Visibility, which means different things to different people, holds different levels of importance. So I'm wondering, what does Trans Day of Visibility mean to you on a personal level?
in my coming out process, I didn't see anyone who looked like me in a dozen different ways. But I knew that I wasn't a girl, a woman, female, what have you, from a very young age, but there wasn't any language for that outside of if you say that you don't want to be this, then you must want to be the opposite, right? There was no language for the fact that I didn't feel like either. And once I, in my grad school years, ended up in Gainesville, Florida, and I made friends at the University of Florida, many of whom were in the gender and women's studies programs there. And I started learning language and terminology that I'd never heard before. And I was also introduced to Tumblr, which was an incredible resource at that time for me in my process. Because I went through this deal where I didn't feel that I was a woman. I knew that I wasn't a woman, but did that mean that I then had to present masculine because I was in this queer relationship? Um, and it seems so silly to me now looking back at that, but it was such a terrifying experience of not knowing how I was supposed to just be, what Naomi I was supposed to be. I got into being into drag. I was kinging for several years. And that was a really big struggle too, because I was a very high femme king. And that was not something that I guess was seen in that area of Florida. And so I received a lot of flack and was told that I needed to act like a guy and act more masculine. And the way that I was walking and doing my makeup and my hair wasn't passable. And there was just so much cognitive dissonance that was happening for me in that situation that I pulled really far back from it. And I just started to present more masculine of center on a daily basis. And it felt very clunky for me at that time. It felt very clunky. It didn't feel like that wasn't me. I still felt like I was trying to figure out, I was playing dress up as this, late 20s adult. And when I finally understood that there was this aspect of non binary gender or just being off the spectrum of binary gender, I then thought, well, shit, what do I do now? Am I supposed to be nothing? Because my body does not allow for me to look androgynous. It doesn't. And that's not what I want. Even when I was presenting mask of center, I was still very high femme mask of center, which was even more confusing for people. Um, I grow out a full face of facial hair. I can have a full beard if I don't shave. And at one point in time in my journey, I had my beard completely grown out with a full face of makeup. And it just really was throwing everyone off. It was throwing me off. I just really didn't know what was supposed to be going on with myself. And then I met this individual. Their name is Jack. They're one of my very dear friends. And they were, and this is Jack Gutierrez. They were they were the first agender femme I ever met in my entire life.
Oh, cool.
Someone who was as femmy as I am, who was also saying that they didn't have a gender. And from there, I felt comfortable enough to know that I could be just me. I could wake up and be me, however I felt like I wanted to be me that day. And that was just as valid. And that it didn't mean that being me was proving that I was a woman or something to that degree. So then I had the freedom to actually understand what my gender was. because for me, it wasn't just falling into a non-binary group and feeling comfortable there. I took more of an approach culturally, and being Kurdish and being Persian, there wasn't an idea or a thought process behind sexual orientation or gender before colonization, before westernization. And especially as a Kurd, we obviously know that there is no country, there is no Kurdistan, and that Kurds were experiencing still active genocide to this day. And so the traditional roots are still very strong. And if you look at Kurdish heritage, which is what I did because I was feeling very strongly pulled towards that with my gender, I found that gender just wasn't something that was a framework. And because of that, it was a very matriarchal community. And so it was even more of this, these women are warriors and badasses. And it's not about them being women, it's about them being Kurdish.
Okay.
And so when I found the word Neutrois, which was a kind of a wink to my French side too, which was kind of funny because that word only exists in the French language. But Neutrois, to the easiest sense of being able to translate that, is essentially neutral gender or null gender. And so when I explain this, it's not about me saying that I am off of a spectrum of a binary gender. For me personally, I've just opted out of it.
Okay.
So for me personally, I just feel like that wasn't something that was a part of my ancestry. And so I'm owning that back again, that that's not what my identifier is, and that my identifier is Naomi. And so it's very easy to just say, yeah, I'm non-binary for people because it's a lot less education to have to do. So people will definitely see that I will identify as non-binary here, there, and everywhere. But in these opportunities, it's really nice to get to talk about the fact that I don't feel like I fall into that category at all, any sort of gender category. And to be very clear, that doesn't mean that I don't think that gender exists, because we are a society that believes that gender exists. So it is there, it exists. I'm choosing to opt out of it myself. And I'm very comfortable in that and in knowing that. And I'm still at 35 trying to get more comfortable with the fact that I'm always cis perceived. So by doing that, I'm also just becoming a lot louder about not being cis. So that's probably what I'm the most loud about, is that the one thing that we need to get cis is that I'm not cis. that's like it, it's kind of like my queer identifier overall. You just know that it means that I'm not straight and I'm not cisgender. Like, the rest is up to me.
I love that. What does getting loud look like for you?
Oh, my goodness. Getting loud for me really just means breaking out of any sort of norm that makes people comfortable in the room. So, on a professional level, I know that I've always for years have gotten flack for the fact that I don't shave my legs and I don't shave my armpits, and all of these different ways that I dress are very loud and people think are inappropriate for professionals to be acting that way. As somebody who's very socially inept, which I know is a big surprise for anyone who knows me, and for someone who's very socially awkward, one of the ways that I can handle that myself and also kind of make it a teachable moment is if I call all the attention onto me, make myself the sparkliest, most interesting thing in the entire room, and then by consequence, you listen to me. And sometimes I'm able to captivate. And obviously I mean that in my immense amount of beauty, but I also mostly mean captivating a person's attention, especially if it's a person who has a lot of power that they can leverage in that room. So being loud for me really does mean trying to use every single aspect of my privilege that I know that I have in any room that I walk into to be as subversive as possible. And I also know that a lot of times I will get invited into spaces because people don't know that those identities are me. That's not something that if you're just hiring me off of, LinkedIn or something, you may not know that I'm somebody who's queer and that I'm somebody who's trans. So you got me into the room, and now I'm going to be very, very loud about that. And I'm going to let you know that. And I'm going to let you know how that's incredibly important as to what we're talking about right now. Like I was saying in a conversation the other day, this is far removed from just a discussion about gender, but when somebody brings up, for example, you're always making this about race. Well, in every single situation and every single topic, it literally does have to do with race in the same way that it has to always do with gender and disability and all of these other things. So there is always a time and place in every single situation to have these conversations, but it is absolutely about having the privilege to take up that space. And so that's what I mean about being as loud about it as possible. Okay, you invited me here. Hopefully you don't regret
it. So just, you're going into that space and you're using that space to be visible, to educate people, to let people know like the things that maybe they'd normally shy away from. And you're
Yeah.
kind of just, in a way, forcing them to hear you and your
Oh,
story and your
absolutely.
experiences.
But I really just want to be an opening process and kind of an entryway for other people to actually come in. It's so easy to play the, speaking for those who aren't heard game. It's very easy to
Yeah,
play that game. I am trying very hard to pass the mic as much as possible, so to speak.
it's wonderful. And that kind of makes me think of the next question I had, which is you're able to use your visibility and navigate spaces in very powerful ways. So I'm wondering, like, there's a lot of people out there who, trans, non-binary, any identities that, kind of go outside of the traditional man, woman, gender binary, that maybe can't be out, can't be visible for any number of reasons. So I'm wondering, what are some like words of support, encouragement, any other things that you can offer for people that just cannot be visible or cannot be out?
I would want individuals who are in this position, who are watching Trans Day of Visibility, who are looking at the individuals who have an immense amount of privilege to be able to openly say who they are and to openly be visible. I would hope that everyone who is able to be as visible as possible is thinking about the individuals who would be unsafe, unwell, or unwelcome if they did the same thing. That there are those of us out there who are visible, who are not trying to convince you that it's going to get better, but that are trying to make it better for you. I guess I hope that one day you're able to be as visible as you want to be. I hope that whatever that means for you, whether that is waking up in the morning and shaving your face or letting the hair grow in or wearing makeup or not wearing makeup, or even just being able to tell someone what your pronouns are or what your name is, that you know who you are at all times, that even when you're not able to be visible, that you are still 110% you. You are still absolutely every single part of you that you know that you are. And if you have any feelings of resentment or anger or criticism for Trans Day of Visibility, I'm right there with you and I get it and I understand. Parts of our community that we know are the biggest, most moving parts of our community who actually got shit done and got shit going. Like we look at trans women of color who are all like all of these trans women who've done all these incredible things and are the reason why we have pride, etc. Those individuals, depending on where they're living, depending on what they're doing, depending on what job they have or who they love or who loves them, may never be able to be 100% open about who they are. I struggled before I was completely out with days that were like this. And I'm not an individual who, knowing what I know now, would have been in a place of danger for being visible. I would have been a place of discomfort maybe and
Mhm.
confusion. And at that time, I did think that there would have been a physical danger for me to come out because I am a child of an immigrant. I am Iranian. I did not know how my father or my father's family was going to take me being who I am. And I certainly know that, even if I was allowed to go to Iran, I never could because I'm open about these identities. But regardless, knowing what I know now and knowing the support that I have now, it would have been very easy for me to be visible and out then. And I guess I'm just going to keep going in a cycle of talking about safety because really
Mm,
visibility can be amazing and it can be wonderful and it can be freeing and it can be the most incredible experience, but it also can be the most deadly experience.
mhm,
And just existing isn't possible for so many people in the community. And that's so easily forgotten when we have days like this, when we have days of visibility, when so many of us are still so very invisible. So, too long, didn't read. My response is to those of you who can't be visible today, know that it's not about not being able to be visible to anyone else but yourself.
Everything you shared is so powerful, and I appreciate you sharing all of that. That's exactly, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I mean, I think like you touched on, it's easy to focus on just like, yay, let's be visible. It's a day of
Yeah.
celebration. And I think, I mean, to me, I think that aspect is important, but it's a disservice to only focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
it's
like you
like,
pointed out, like the safety piece is such
yeah.
a big deal, whether it's physical safety or financial well-being, somebody's mental well-being, whatever it may be. Like there's so many factors as to why people can't be out. There's so many factors as to why some people don't even want to be out and
Yeah.
visible. Like they're just living their lives and they don't want that to be a forward-facing part of their identity, and that's perfectly okay if that's what works for them.
Yeah,
um,
I think that's a very, very valid point that you touched on that I don't think is often talked about is that there are absolutely many people in our community who are very comfortable never openly presenting in any way that they do outside of their own home or outside of their own head, that there are plenty of people who do want to keep aspects of themselves to themselves. And that's okay. I mean, you're still you and your gender, even when the unfortunate fact is that most people may not see it, but that's still cool because you still know who you are.
Absolutely. Can I have one last question?
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah. Thanks
nice.
for letting me word vomit at you.
Please. I love it. It's all perfect. Yeah, the last that I have is kind of just a lighthearted question for closing it out. Like what's one thing that comes to mind for you about that you just love about being Naomi, about holding the gender identity that you do, whether, just using the label Naomi or Neutrois or whatever feels like it fits. Like, what's one of your favorite things about kind of just existing in the world as you?
There are not very many examples of femme perceived individuals who are also of a non-binary or gender. There are just not very many examples of that. I think like one of the best things that I've seen in a meme recently is like how my non-binary friends dress, and it's like Gonzo from Sesame Street, and how Target thinks they're supposed to look, and it's a potato sack. So when we see these gender neutral or these non-binary things, it's always these very like boring things that are put out in terms of fashion and in terms of people. We see very specific body types. We see very specific looks, very specific haircuts of what people seem to think when they think of non-binary. Very easy, like put that into Google and look at the images, and you'll see that there's a very specific perception of what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what a huge life-changing moment it was for me to meet somebody who said, nope, I don't have a gender, and was incredibly femme too. That was an enormous difference for me. And I still to this day, years later, 10 years later now, still don't know too many individuals who are genderless who are also femme. Um, The list is growing, of course, but there aren't very many, at least not to maybe the degree that I express being femme. But it's really exciting every single time I do a presentation or I show up at a college pre-pandemic, or I do any sort of training and a person comes up to me either afterwards, or during, or sends me an email months later that's like, I didn't know I could be both. I don't have to choose. And what an incredible burden to get to lift off of you. I love when I get to catch people earlier in their lives for them to realize, oh, wow, I can actually just focus on what this means to me and not how I explain it to other people. I think that's a really cool thing. If I get to cut out any of those steps, that's exciting. But a little footnote for all of my fellow advocates and activists out there, and for anyone who accesses them for resources. Please also remember that the people that you see as resources are also people. Because I unfortunately see so many of my colleagues and fellow advocates just being used for quotes or for little think pieces or just asked for information. Can you send me this? Or tagged in a social media post, or this expectation that just because that person makes themselves so available to teach you doesn't mean that they're always going to have that hat on. I have that hat on maybe 95% of the time more than other people do. So I just want to make it really clear that not all of us have that capacity and not all of us want to be on all the time like that. And if you haven't thanked your friendly neighborhood resource that you access often, please, when you're done watching this, do that and tell them that you appreciate the time that they take.
So many good things there. I think I really love that idea of just, I feel like you put it so succinctly, like just remembering that at the end of the day, people in the community are also just people. Yeah. Like, and I feel like that's like, I feel like it's so much simpler than kind of the idea of like kind of explain it in a way like it's not my responsibility to teach you everything. Like it's like a simple way that kind of packages up all those ideas into one in a very humanizing way, to remember that like we, like you and me, we choose to be on a lot of the time because we feel it's important to give people like those, like as you were talking, I was thinking this is like a light bulb moment that you're giving people, whether it's people figuring out their own identities or finding an understanding for other people's identities. And we choose to be able to do that, but we also have to find time to recharge emotionally, physically, and it can be very draining to be very open and vulnerable and vocal about identities that are very close to our heart.
Yeah. It often comes with an expectation of being very vulnerable and exposing sides of yourself for the purpose and cause of trying to educate, and that's draining in and of itself.
Before we kind of wrap up, any last thoughts or things you want to share, or whether anything we didn't cover that you want people to know, whether it's about Trans Day of Visibility or about you or anything else?
I think that, as we are taping this, we're at the tail end of National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. Because of what this week stands for and everything, is also for people to understand that at the very minimum and base sense of things, there's never any reason to comment on a person's physical appearance, ever. I only pulled in talking about eating disorder awareness because that was just right now what's going on. But whether it is about a person's body size, about the way a person is presenting, about the way a person is dressing, there is never a reason, unless that person is asking you or has made it very clear that those are welcome things to receive from you, to ever comment on someone's physical appearance. because even sometimes telling a person that they're beautiful or you love their smile may also be unwelcome. So
Yeah.
understanding that what you have to say is not always the most important thing that needs to be heard in the room. Take a step back, think about it, and think about whether or not that's actually a helpful thing to bring up, or if it's something that you're trying to call attention to in a way that's going to put that person in a bad position or a humiliating position. On that note, I would like to remind everybody that everybody is a beach body as we come up onto summertime. Whether that is in terms of weight or where you're at with your transition, if you plan to be doing any sort of physical or hormonal transitioning, everybody is a beach body. Everybody is beautiful. And I guess I just want to add one more thing, so
Go
I can
for
do a
it.
little bit extra. I would like for everyone who is not at all aware of or attuned to what's happening with foster family systems, with the foster system in their state or in their city jurisdiction, et cetera, to remember that there are those of us in this community who are queer, who are trans, who are also kids in the foster care system. And
Mhm.
that kids in the foster care system are much more likely to run away and to end up homeless and houseless growing up without a social system if they are transgender and or queer. And there are very few foster families who are open and affirming. There are many, many more now than there used to be, but there are so few that are also trans families who are doing fostering, or
Mhm.
also gay families that are doing fostering. And there are so many roadblocks that are put in place for us to be able to do that. But if you have the ability and the privilege to do so, please get involved if that's something you're interested in, whether that is becoming a guardian ad litem volunteer, and even finding agencies that are local to you that work with foster youth who are specifically working to be affirming. And for those places where if you have the ability to leverage some power to trying to get into some of those more conservative spaces to make situations a little bit safer. You can think of things like shelters and talking about how shelters and sheltering people and teens in binary genders can be incredibly dangerous. Just being able to be a spokesperson for these kids, because so often we are the ones who are unwanted in those systems. And when we are unwanted, we will run away. And when we run
Yeah.
away, we don't have support. And that means we are much more likely to end up in situations that are dangerous or deadly. And we are the queers and the trans people that we would have looked up to. And if we want to be those people that queer and trans kids look up to, we need to find the kids who don't have anyone to look up to. So please get involved at a local level here in St. Petersburg, Florida. Family Resources is an incredible organization that does fostering, and they are very queer and trans affirming. They've done a lot of work to try and make safe spaces, affirming spaces for queer and transgender kids. I could go on a whole monologue about working with youth. But if that's not available to you, please go work with our elder gays and trans people too. We do get old. And unfortunately, our nursing care system and retirement care system has not really caught up to the rest of us when it comes to being trans and queer, accepting and affirming. So if you can't work with the kids, try and go volunteer with the elderly, and be that really open queer or trans person if you have the ability to, so that, you know, maybe some of those individuals who have put themselves back in the closet or who have, been forced into detransitioning just for their own safety as they age, get in there. Let's go where people are the most vulnerable, and that's with our youths and with our old folks.
So many great things. So many ways that we can give back to the community. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, kind of related to that on a closing note, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm having everybody who's doing a video with me identify an organization or charity that serves, people in the trans, non-binary communities, what organization would you want people who are watching this video to donate time or money to if they're able to?
Yeah. Here locally in St. Petersburg, or if you're in the Florida area, I highly recommend trying to donate to Family Resources, the Family Resources charity. Um, at a wider scale, the Trans Lifeline is an incredible organization, especially during the pandemic. I know that they have been very shorthanded, not only in volunteers, but also in terms of their funding capabilities. So being able to continue that hotline for trans individuals would be incredibly important and serves everyone of every age. And then also, I am a strong supporter of very few federal organizations, but I'm very much in support of the Trevor Project because of all of the different ways that they support our communities, and how they are very, very invested when it comes to um, mental health awareness, and also the increased access to mental health resources. Yeah, any of those specific hotlines and lifelines are so incredibly important. I know that they've been ringing off the hooks.
Wonderful. So I'll make sure to put links to all of those down below so everybody can easily access that and learn more and support if you can. Well, thank you so much, Naomi. This has been wonderful. I feel like I've learned so much just in general and about you, and it's been really wonderful to be able to hold this space for you. And I'm really
Oh, it's
glad
been a
that,
pleasure. It's been an
yeah,
absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chloe.
of course. Thank you everyone who has taken the time to watch, and remember to like and comment below if you have any questions about anything that Naomi has talked about today, or any just comments or anything you want to share about Trans Day of Visibility. Let us all know below. I love you all. Bye for now.